Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
This week, one lawmaker describes why California's clean car standards aren't right for Minnesota, and another outlines the challenges farmers face in passing on the family business. Plus, the governor's revised supplemental budget and a Republican proposal for paid family and medical leave. Stay tuned for this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's adoption of California's clean car emission standards has caused consternation among some Minnesotans and raised questions about the scope of an agency's rulemaking authority. In response, Senator Andrew Mathews has proposed the Consumer Choice of Fuel Act, and he joins me to talk more about it. Welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. Good to be with you.
Your caucus in particular was not pleased last year when it became known that the Pollution Control Agency planned to adopt California's clean car emission standards. Minnesota was one of about 15 states to adopt some form of the California standards, but the only one in the Midwest. Why are you opposed?
So the main issue between why we are opposed to these rulemaking standards is because I believe these decisions should be made by the legislature. The House and the Senate, we're representing our individual districts from around the state of Minnesota, and we're accountable to the people in our districts. And if I don't make the right decisions, my district can send someone else here in my stead. But an agency doesn't have that level of accountability. They're not up for election, and they've been taking the rulemaking authority that's laid out in statute, and they're stretching the limits. I think they've gone too far beyond what the statute allows them to do. That's what a lot of this debate has centered around. But it comes back to the principle that these decisions should be made by legislators that are accountable to the people.
In committee, you said that the rulemaking process is flawed and that an agency adopting another state's rules, which this is an example of, we're taking California's rules and adopting them here in Minnesota, limits the scope of the conversation. What do you mean?
I think it's flawed because the legislative process, I believe, is more transparent. We have committees that are open to the public. Anyone can come in, and people have come in and spoken both for and against the bill that I've brought forward. We can talk about it in our districts. We have people that are asking about these issues in our districts. And the rulemaking process is not that transparent. They have a few meetings throughout the state of Minnesota, but they don't hit every corner like us legislators do to each corner back home. And I don't see where the agency has really changed their position. I think they came in, I already had decided ahead of time what they wanted to do, and went through the motions of a few of these hearings around the state that didn't cover all areas. They didn't come within anywhere close in my district. And they'd already continued to do the decision they, I think, already had in mind ahead of time. So the legislative process is just more transparent, more accessible. Anyone can contact me or my office and share their thoughts, and I listen to my constituents. And I think it is just much more accountable and much more transparent than the rulemaking process is.
Your bill would require that state agencies get legislative approval in order to adopt rules that are coming from another state. So in essence, if this were to happen again, the Pollution Control Agency would come to the legislature and say, hey, we want to adopt California's rule standards, emission standards, and then that would elicit a robust debate. Why is it important? You've already said, but to you it is very important then that the legislature weigh in.
It is, and that's kind of to bring it back to that principle. California has already adopted more rules than what the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has just agreed to adopt by rulemaking. So about the time these rules come into effect, they're already going to be moot because they'll then have to reconsider the new, even greater rules that California has taken a step farther. They've already gone to no gasoline engine vehicles in their state or for sale in their state by 2035. So about the time that the Minnesota rules take effect, they're already going to be moot. We're already going to go through this rulemaking process again. And I think it should come back to the legislature. So if we're going to do it this rules way, I want the legislature to have insight and approval into it. And I hope it points to the fact that these should be policy decisions that we make here in the legislature anyways.
The bill that you're proposing, the Consumer Choice of Fuel Act, if it became law, it would essentially cancel the California standards, which do call for a percentage of vehicles available in Minnesota by 2025 to be low emission or zero emission vehicles. The other thing that it does is it protects consumer choice of fuel on other types of equipment, for example, generators, lawnmowers, boats, and motorcycles. In your view, is this ultimately about consumer choice?
Yes, it is. I think the agencies won't say right now if they're going to try to expand these rules into other areas, into your household items, your lawnmowers and snowmobiles, or to other agriculture, commercial trucks, tractors and whatnot. And they've always couched those phrases saying, well, we have no plans to do so at this time. And I just have this hunch deep down that one day they probably will take another step into new areas just by rulemaking. And it is about consumer choice. I think consumers should have these decisions to make for themselves. I think the market is growing in these other electric vehicles and other electric options, and I think that is wonderful, and they are already growing right now as we speak. But I don't want this to be a decision done by rulemaking that doesn't have any accountability to it. If it's going to be done, it should be done by legislators like myself that are accountable to our districts.
Well, to the end of choice, proponents of the rule change have said that it was necessary just to encourage more products to become available in Minnesota, the zero emission and low emission vehicles. And one could argue that with the high cost of gasoline right now, there may be a lot more people who are interested in alternative fuel sources. Do you trust that the marketplace will take care of this?
I do. I think the market will respond to the high gas prices. And I think some people will look more at electric vehicles. They are pretty expensive right now, so that is a limiting factor for a lot of people. But I do believe that the market can take care of this. If you go to any dealer, and dealers came in and testified to this and say, we are bending over backwards to try to get an electric vehicle product when we have a customer that wants to come in and buy them, but there's not the demand for it yet that these rules would require the dealers to have in stock and to have on their lots. And so that's going to end up driving the cost up. That'll drive the cost of the rest of their vehicle fleet up when they're forced to have products on that they can't sell. So I believe that the market can help with this. These dealers do want to help their customers when someone comes in and they want to buy one of these vehicles, but it's not wise, in my opinion, to artificially force more products on these lots than the market's ready for right now.
And finally, before we go, one of the roles of the Pollution Control Agency is to regulate air pollution. One of the major contributors to lower air quality comes from the operation of internal combustion engines. Do you think the legislature should be doing more to improve air quality?
I think we can always look at that and look for ways to do more. The statute right now says that the Pollution Control Agency has the authority to regulate the emission levels of vehicles on our roads. And if they had a proposal that just was doing that, to have something to work on the emission levels, that would be one thing. But their rules are going to what products can be bought and sold on these dealer lots.
Senator Andrew Mathews, thank you so much.
Thank you.
At a suburban Twin Cities gas station, Governor Tim Walz and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan recently highlighted revisions to their supplemental budget proposal.
We're proposing now with the new revised budget $1,000 for a couple, $500 for a family. These were not tax increases on families. They were increased revenues that were generated by spending mostly during COVID. And to take that, it would be about $2 billion of the surplus and send it back in checks right now to make a difference at the pump, to make a difference at the grocery store until we get stability in the Ukraine, get Russia out of the Ukraine, get some stability in our prices. It would help Minnesotans. We also have some really great things in here we think reduce long-term costs for people. We've talked about time and time again around healthcare reduction in costs. We also have talked about the ability of child care to be more affordable. One of the major changes we made with this revision, as revenue numbers were up overall over the last few months, is to the state pensions. And many of you know this, the State Board of Investments in Minnesota has the highest rating of any of the states. We have seen record amounts of revenue go into that because of smart investments by Mansco Perry and the State Board of Investment folks that are involved with that. We're proposing a 2.5% cost of living increase that right now, at a time when people need that, to all of our state pension holders. That doesn't risk the solvency of those pensions in any way, but it reacts to a reality that as costs go up, we should react accordingly. Social Security did that. Our state pensions can do that, so it asks the legislature to try and move those things forward. But the good news here is once again, we're in a position to have strong rainy day funds. We're in a position where we have low unemployment rates, high labor participation rates. We're seeing our economy, even at a time of turmoil, being resilient. One of the best things we can do for that economy and for families is put money into their pockets right now.
This budget includes, as the governor said, the $500 for individuals and $1,000 for families in additional direct payments. And let's be real about what that actually means for folks. That means that you can buy, several boxes of diapers. That means if you're waiting to, fix your car, if you have a repair, it's rent, it's part of your house payment. These are real costs for people at a moment when folks need some immediate relief. And as we're here at the pump, we can do that for folks too. So I'm excited about that. Research has shown us is that, there's a recent report that shows babies of low-income moms who've received cash stipends, that the brain development of their children is increased. So if we increase family income, we improve child outcomes, and I think that's really clear, and it's what we're trying to do here.
Senate and House Republicans proposed a plan to extend paid family and medical leave to more Minnesotans.
We looked for solutions to answer the question of how we help Minnesotans gain access in times of need to take care of themselves and their loved ones in a way that enables a healthy economy for all Minnesotans. Our proposal answers both needs. It will expand the availability of paid leave across Minnesota, particularly for those who work for small businesses. Businesses will be able to provide a competitive benefit that suits their workforce, and families will have more options to care for their loved ones in a time of need. This paid family leave legislation has two components. First, it authorizes the creation of a paid family leave insurance employers may purchase to offer their employees. This product is offered in several other states, has passed with bipartisan support, and is able to be written specifically with the family needs in mind. It is not an ill-fitting suit. Businesses can customize it to their needs and provide families with the coverage they need. To further help expand the number of employees offered paid leave as part of their employment, we will also include significant tax credits to help small businesses afford this option.
When I talk to employers, small businesses up in my area, they want to offer paid family leave to their employees. And the barrier today has been cost and the availability of insurance products that allow, especially small employers, to be able to affordably provide paid family leave. Our proposal will leverage the private sector infrastructure that's already in place and be able to get more people more access to paid family leave quicker and more efficiently.
And the governor provided an update after recent negotiations with legislative leaders.
We're still trying to deal with what I think is a time-sensitive issues around keeping our promise that we made last June to frontline workers, and then making sure that we're providing stability in the UI Trust Fund, especially to employers on their payments into those funds. Not much movement today on that, but I think more of a clarification that there is a lot of space in here to negotiate a win-win. We're at the point now where we're starting to be a little more specific about asking for offers and counter offers to kind of start moving. And then we spoke a little bit about, I think with great optimism from all the legislative leaders, that a bonding proposal and a bonding bill will certainly be something we need to get done. And that was really encouraging because the minority leaders, Senator Franzen and Leader Dowd, both expressed optimism that their caucus is prepared to talk about that and get a fairly substantial bonding proposal done. So we're here again, the first full day of spring. We've got about 8 weeks left, about 40 working days if they're during the work week. So things need to start moving. Again, Minnesota's in a strong position. The situation around COVID is much more stable than it has been in a long time. Our hospital numbers are down below 275, I believe, in terms of folks in the hospital. All of those things, of course, bode well as we try and get through this legislative session.
Farmers are accustomed to facing challenges, from weather and commodity prices to land values and estate planning. Senator Bill Weber is leading the charge to make some property tax adjustments to aid farmers in the generational transfer of the family farm, and he joins me now. Welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you very much.
When I think of a family farm, I think of a very bucolic setting, like my great-grandparents' farm in Iowa. There was a little bit of everything, some corn and beans, some cows and pigs, and a shuffleboard court, which I loved as a kid. But for the most part, I think that's a memory. What do successful family farm operations look like today?
Well, certainly there's a wide variety of family farm operations out there, but I think it's safe to say that in most instances, they're probably larger than what you remember them being. You know, they've either enlarged in terms of the amount of land they farmed or in the amount of livestock they produce, and in some instances, both. I would also say that we have many instances where you might have had, you know, Grandpa had his farm and he put his son or daughter on a farm and vice versa. But now, you know, there's a much larger operation where they're farming together, quite frankly. And sometimes I have introduced certain bills that people said, well, where's the family farmer on this? Well, the family farmer is now a part of a larger group, and they may have an LLC or an LLP, but it's still a family farm operation, and you have many family members involved. And so the structure, the operation itself has changed considerably since you were visiting your grandparents on the farm.
Yeah. So one of your bills would raise the first tier valuation for property tax to $2.5 million, which seems like a lot of money until you consider the value of the land. So how have high land prices impacted farmers' wealth and their ability to pass the farm on to the next generation?
Well, certainly the increase in values increases wealth, but it really does nothing to helping provide cash for their everyday operations. And so as values go up, so do real estate taxes, which then cuts into the cash flow. And you know, and I think it's important today to remember that right now we're seeing some recovery in our commodity prices, corn, soybeans, especially. And so people say, wow, you know, that's quite a recovery. However, we see fertilizer costs that are tripling. We see our seed and chemical costs, which is more than doubling. And I had a farmer tell me yesterday that, quite frankly, his margin is smaller today with the substantially higher grain prices than it was in 2006. And so when he had $2.50 corn, you know, and just because of the cost of inputs. And so, you know, one of the purposes of raising the ag homestead exclusion is to at least afford some measure of relief in the property tax situation. I think that the Department of Revenue's estimate is that would reduce real estate taxes on the average unit for about $1,200.
I visited the University of Minnesota Extension website on maintaining farmland homestead classification, and my head began to spin about 4 townships and 4 this, and it was really interesting. The other bill you were sponsoring is fairly technical, but is intended to help with modern farm succession. What are some of the problems that people are facing?
Well, what we saw is that in today's situation, you might see the establishment of a family trust, or you see, as I mentioned, a family farm, a corporation, or a partnership, and thereby, because different entities were operating it, but a different entity owned the property, yet it was still the same people involved in both entities, we were seeing people lose their homesteads. And actually, I had a bill a couple of years ago that dealt with that issue. This bill is sort of cleaning up some loose ends from that to make sure that the Department of Revenue understands that this is what we intend, that they get full benefit of their homestead exclusions, regardless of the nature of their operation and ownership structure, so to speak. And so now, in terms of farm succession, yeah, that is a major problem. When I was serving as the chair of the Ag and Housing Policy Committee, I also then served as a Senate representative on MALC, which is the Minnesota Agricultural Leadership Council. That involves a lot of our ag teachers. It involves a lot of our farm management personnel from our MinSCU campuses that provide farm management assistance to farming families. And the transfer of the family farm to the next generation is a major problem. And escalating property values do nothing but hurt and exacerbate that problem. You know, currently Minnesota's estate exclusion is $3 million. It actually doesn't take that large of a farm operation to be valued at $3 million today, and yet it's not a large farm operation. Right now in my home county, at the right farm, that could be less than 200 acres. And that was probably similar to your grandparents' size farm, yes, to be honest about it.
Yeah.
And so it is a real substantial problem with that transfer, particularly when you start to have a number of generations that are still involved in the operation, so to speak. And therefore, it necessitates these different structures, be it trusts, be it LLCs, be it LLPs, in order for them to help transfer that property and have a mechanism whereby the next generation doesn't get hit with this huge cost all of a sudden.
Well, and that brings up something you mentioned in committee. You called it the Prince Charles scenario, where the owners of the farm are quite elderly, and maybe a son or daughter has been actually doing the bulk of the farming work for many, many years, but now there's a grandchild who is ready to take over. Is this more common than we might think?
It is. I think it's maybe going down somewhat, but no, it is still fairly common. You know, a lot of it depends on the individual attitude of the farmer. Some people, as they start to get older, recognize that they need to relinquish control of the operation, the decision-making process, to the next generation. And you know, and there are some scenarios whereby maybe Grandpa and Grandma didn't feel they could afford to retire, and so that has kept them involved in a longer-term situation. But yet, there again, you know, I am in my mid-60s, and there are a lot of farmers in my age bracket that now have children that are 30 and 40 years old that are there, fully capable of taking over the operation, and yet there's still this problem: how are we going to transfer the property, not only from mom and dad to their child, but from grandpa and grandma to the middle generation and then to the following generation. And so it takes some very nimble estate tax planning, to be honest about it. And certainly every time we make some changes in tax law, that, you know, sort of forces them back to the attorney's office to say, is this still applicable for our situation? And every situation is going to vary.
True, because there's any number of farms and commodities and lifestyles and all of that. So before we started, we were talking a little bit about the family farm versus investor-owned farms, and you were telling me that many farmers now are renting their land because they can't afford to buy it. So as we close this conversation, just talk a little bit about some of the challenges that are facing our, quote, family farms today.
Mm-hmm. sometimes people want to automatically poo-poo or badmouth investor-owned ag real estate. And it's not a bad thing. Now, sometimes investors want to come in and they want to operate and they want to do it all. But many times investors wind up leasing their property to the farmer next door, or they lease it to, maybe they've already renting property to a farmer, and that farmer's child wants to get into farming and they lease it to them. We need a certain amount of property owned for rental purposes out there to help our people get started, because quite frankly, they can't afford to make that kind of investment and get started in farming.
Senator Bill Weber, I want to thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
The Senate Human Services Committee advanced a bill that would help those suffering from intractable pain.
The AMA further stated, the CDC's threshold recommendations continue to be used against patients with pain to deny care. The CDC policy has harmed patients with cancer, sickle cell disease, and those in hospice. The restrictive CDC policies also fail patients who are stable on long-term opioid therapy.
I have suffered with chronic pain for over 20 years. I have MS and a deformed spine. The vertebrae in my spine have fused together so they're straight. I can no longer sit, I can't sleep, and I can't walk. I functioned great. I was able to work for the state of Minnesota, Department of Public Safety, helping people get their driver's license back. Had founded a nonprofit organization, finding homes for 7,000 cats and kittens, find loving homes. I've given all of that up. Was forced to retire, and now I live in a world of darkness and despair. I lost my quality of life, and now it's in existence. I don't have a pain doctor anymore. I got dumped because he was so afraid of the fear of the DEA and the guidelines. So he basically abandoned me. Chronic pain patients are not provided any resources, and are left to fend for themselves. Many have turned to the streets out of desperation. Many more have ended their lives and are suffering through suicide. Suicide rates have skyrocketed over 400% in the last year among chronic pain patients. An option no one should have to consider. This one-size-fits-all approach is sacrificing one population of people for another. The most vulnerable group of people there are. They shouldn't have to fight for the right to live a comfortable life.
There was a problem in the past, overcorrected, and I'm just so sorry that some individuals had to suffer.
We were kind of warned that this might happen.
Those suffering from intractable pain and unable to access medication have been a part of the collateral damage in this healthcare challenge.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.